Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. Yesterday talks on the territory of the United Arab Emirates ended, and we see that these talks brought no results. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, during the previous 12 hours made lots of very interesting statements. He said that Ukraine should be a friendly, not necessarily an ally, but a neutral state. Another important statement, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov indicated that the issue of the Russian language and the Ukrainian Orthodox Church are being discussed in negotiations on Ukraine, and Moscow continues to insist on them. So we see that despite the fact that the US representatives told us many times that currently there is just one or two issues between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. Mainly we're talking about issue of territories and issue of military forces. We see that probably this is not the correct statements from the American side. We see that there are still lots of problems between Ukraine and Russia. For example, another problem was emphasized by Zelensky. He said that if some countries recognize our territories as Russian, it won't achieve anything. Not all countries will recognize them anyway. This is how he commented on Russia's demand that all countries recognize Donbas as Russian. But despite the fact that we still haven't received anything from the negotiation process between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, we see that the conflict suddenly has been changed. And first of all, we are talking about the Starlink system. I would like to remind you that yesterday we received updates that mass disconnections of Russian Starlink terminals have begun. Russian sources reported that more than 500,000 terminals had lost connections through Russian-controlled territory. And this is a very big issue, and it seems that the Russians weren't prepared for this situation. You know that it was very interesting to understand and to see whether this will impact Russia's offensive capabilities. And if you remember, yesterday we discussed that despite the fact that we had a lot of updates, we are talking about videos, geolocations and so on. For the first time probably since the beginning of the special military operation, we haven't received almost anything when talking about changes on the ground. And of course, first 24 hours passed, and now we are following and we're watching the next 24 hours, and it's very important to understand whether we are going to receive changes during the upcoming day. And you know that today several neutral experts and pro-Ukrainian experts made very interesting statements on this matter. Let's discuss them in details. About the Starlink situation. After unregistered users were cut off from using the terminal, Russian attack intensity suddenly and sharply dropped, at least in the Ternovat and Barovo directions. So according to neutral experts and pro-Ukrainian reports, the Russians stopped their offensive operation in the Zaporozhye direction, and the Russians stopped their offensive in the Barovo direction. Later we received more details about the situation with the Starlink system, and the same sources stated Konstantinovka, yes, Russian attacks generally slowed down. The biggest difference is noticeable with attacks coming from the Chasiv Yar side, but a slowing down is also noticed in the other parts of the direction. So this is the situation. We see that the Russians weren't prepared to this situation with the Starlink system. Now the Russians are trying to find a solution. Now the Russians are trying to change their plans, because according to information we have, according to the previous development of the situation along the line of combat contact, the Russians were planning to get the siege of Zaporozhye before the summer of 2026, and most likely the Russians indeed were planning to finish the battle for the Donbas region in 2026 as well. But now we see that most likely the Russians would be forced to change their plans, and this is a very important situation because the situation with the economy in the world, not just in Russia, is worsening, which means that lots of plans would be changed during the upcoming year. But at the same time, let's wait and see what is going to be next, because all these things that are happening right now and all these updates that are coming from the situation on the ground about the Starlink system could be just a propaganda and could be just a special operation carried out by special forces, so to spread disinformation between each other. Because during the previous 24 hours, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very important updates that indicate that something is going to happen in coming hours. Now let's discuss this in details. According to information we have, during the previous night, the Russians carried out a small attack with missiles and drones, and as you can see, according to this map, the Russians attacked the city of Kropyvnytskyi. The Russians used for these purposes drones, hypersonic missiles of Kinzhal type, and the Russians used cruise missiles of Ha-59 type. So something was destroyed on the territory of the city of Kropyvnytskyi as of the beginning of the 6th of February of 2026. It's very difficult to understand what exactly the Russians were attacking, and this attack took place not during the night between the 5th and the 6th of February. This attack took place just 30 minutes ago before I start making this video, so during the morning of the 6th of February. So it's very, very interesting that the Russians attacked the settlement during the daylight, not during the night period of time. Another important update is coming from the Kharkiv region. Currently, it seems that the line and the territory between the city of Kharkiv and the city of Belgorod is becoming the biggest priority both for Russians and for Ukrainians. Today, pro-Russian sources stated that according to information we're receiving, Russians receiving from various sources, including reliable, loyal sources in the Ukrainian armed forces rear, combat groups of the Ukrainian most combat-ready units are concentrating in the eastern Kharkiv Oblast, specifically from the 83rd Brigade, the 3rd Azov Assault Battalion, the 125th Brigade, and other groups without insignia, likely Special Operation Forces. The Ukrainian armed forces assemble such groups exclusively when planning an attack of Russian border territories. So some pro-Russian sources are saying that currently the Ukrainians are building up to the east of the city of Kharkiv, maybe somewhere here, or maybe the Ukrainians are massing themselves to the northwest of the city of Kharkiv, and pro-Russian sources are saying maybe in coming days Ukraine may attack in the direction of the city of Belgorod, and maybe the cutoff of the Starlink system is connected with this possible offensive, because obviously the Russians in a week, in a month, in 2 months will be able to find the solution how to stabilize the situation, how to return the control over their forces and over their army, and of course then it would be not the best time for Ukraine to make any offensive operation if they have this plan. But now, when the Russians still haven't managed to stabilize the situation with the Starlink system, most likely, according to the General Staff of Ukraine, is the best time for them to carry out an offensive operation. And lots of signals indicate that this offensive operation can take place in the Kharkiv region in the direction of the city of Belgorod with the purpose to enter the territory of the Russian Federation. As for the Belgorod region, according to information we have, during the previous night, the Ukrainians were attacking the city with HIMARS missiles. And as a result of these attacks, here we can see the moments when several missiles attacked object of energy infrastructure on the territory of the city. According to information we have, the Ukrainians used more than 10 missiles or something like this. So this is information that was published by Russian sources. Maybe this is not the real situation. So lots of updates, this is, for example, one of the articles. Additionally, at least 5 HIMARS rockets struck the 330 electrical substation on the northwest outskirts of Belgorod city. So lots of missiles were launched, and during these days, lots of updates are taking place exactly in this area. At the same time, the Russians continue offensive operation in this area, and during the previous 12 hours we received a very important video from huge forest along the border. If you remember, during the previous video we were talking a lot about this territory, that the Russians were fighting for these huge forests to the south of the settlement of Marina, and now we start getting reports that the Russians began bombing these forests. So most likely the Russians either have already finished the battle for this territory or about to do this, and the Russians are planning to begin offensive operation in this direction as well. So furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources, for the first time since the beginning of the battle in the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region, confirmed that Russians during the previous days managed to improve their positions significantly around the settlement of Degtyarne. So summarizing everything, we believe that in coming days something huge might happen in this area. Another important video came and was published from the area of the settlement of Trastyanets. In this video, we can see how a train with forces, with military assets arrived on the territory of the city of Trastinets. And when the Russians discovered this train, the Russians began attacking this territory with drones. And as a result of attack, several, let's say, trains were destroyed. And most likely the Ukrainians suffered losses with vehicles or equipment. So as you can see, this attack took place also along the railways that go from the city of Kiev in the direction of the city of Kharkiv. So once again, something is going to happen there. As for the Sumy direction, during the previous 12 hours, additional and huge changes were recorded. It seems that the Russians are trying to attack in this area towards the city of Sumy just with one purpose. Most likely the Russians see the Ukraine's build up, and the Russians are trying to attack with the purpose to distract Ukraine's attention and to ruin Ukraine's plan to attack in the direction of the city of Belgorod. During the previous night, additional changes on the ground were recorded along the border. So this is the situation by the end of the 5th of February, and this is the beginning of the 6th of February. The Russians, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, improved their positions significantly to the south of Grabovskaya, and the Russians, according to pro-Russian sources, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Popovka. So these are the changes, and now we see that the Russians, as you can see, improved their positions significantly during the previous 2 months, and most likely the Russians are planning to keep advancing further in the western direction towards the settlement by the name of Krasnopolia. So something big is going to happen here. I have no doubts about this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Slaviansk direction. During the previous 12 hours, we continue receiving updates from this area, and most of these updates are just about the confirmation of the current line of combat contact. Pro-Ukrainian sources improved Russian positions around the settlement of Nikiforovka. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources expanded the gray zone in this area towards the settlement of Fedorovka Druga, which means that the Russians are very active here. Furthermore, as for the settlement of Privilya, pro-Ukrainian sources published a video of how Ukrainians were attacking Russians on the territory of the settlement, which means that the village is most likely under complete and strong control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And we received a video from the settlement of Nova Markova, and here we can see how the clashes for the village were taking place. And in the final part of this video, we can see Russian soldiers that were raising the Russian flag in the most northern part of the settlement. So once again, based on these videos and based on these updates, we haven't adjusted anything. It's just another confirmation that the Russians are advancing, and it's just another confirmation of the current line of combat contact. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 12 hours, no changes were recorded, and as we discussed at the beginning of the video, Russian attacks generally slowed down. The biggest difference is noticeable with attacks coming from the city of Chasiv Yar. So as for the previous 24 hours, we received just lots of updates, lots of videos of how Russians were attacking vehicles and positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through the entire city. So everything that we used to see yesterday, the day before yesterday, but just with one important change. The Russians are not attacking the city anymore. Maybe they're attacking, but most likely currently the Russians are mainly focused on stabilizing the communication between groups, between units, and when they finish this process, the Russians will resume their offensive operation. As for the Zaporozhye direction, the same story. Once again, according to information we have, the Russians were forced to slow down their offensive operation due to problems and issues with the Starlink system. Very difficult to understand when the Russians are going to fix this issue. During the previous night, we received the report that Russians launched another satellite, a successful launch of Soyuz Su-1B carrier rocket from Plisetsk with a spacecraft for the Russian Defense Ministry has been carried out, the military department reported. Several sources stated that the Russians are trying to stabilize the situation with the communication. The Russians are trying to create something like an analog of the Starlink system, but maybe it's just rumors and maybe it's just speculations from the Russian side. We don't know for sure what kind of satellite the Russians launched, but as of now we know for sure that there is still no let's say, analog from the Russian side to this system, and we see that it seems that the cuts of Russians of these systems began bringing benefits to the armored forces of Ukraine. Very difficult to understand how these benefits and what kind of gap these benefits can create in a week, in 2 months, or something like this. But at the same time, we see that the situation in energy continued deteriorating for the armored forces of Ukraine. Today we got a report that half of Kyiv's left bank remained without heat until the end of winter, according to Ukrainian media. The areas without heat are marked in blue on the map. The Minister of Energy reported that the most critical area in Kyiv remains the area served by the thermal power plant number 4. 1,126 multi-story buildings in the capital are without heat. So, and I would like to remind you that this author of this article stated that due to the destruction of the power plant number 4, this is we can see this situation right now with hits in the eastern bank of the river of Dnipro, and this is the power station number 4. As you can see, the power station was completely destroyed. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians are preparing themselves before the beginning of another massive missile and drone attack through the entire territory of Ukraine, and the sources are saying that the Russians will try to attack Ukraine within the next 48 hours, right before another period of frost comes to Ukraine. This is going to happen between the 7th and the 10th of February, and most likely during this period of time, the Russians will try to destroy probably another power station. Most likely the Russians will try to attack the Zmyivskyi power station, which is located to the southeast of the city of Kharkiv. Probably the Russians will attack the last power station on the territory of the city of Kyiv. So very difficult to understand, but this might be a very powerful attack from the Russian side. And if the armored forces of Ukraine launch another offensive operation, this attack might be the biggest one since the beginning of the special military operation. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.